Hello and welcome to the U.S.-India Business Council's India Ideas Summit, our 45th annual meeting. Given that it's our 45th anniversary, we had hoped that we would be hosting you live at the beautiful Taj Palace Hotel in New Delhi, India. But, well, we're in the middle of a global pandemic and I'm coming to you live from my attic. While COVID-19 may have forced us to come to you virtually and convene together in this virtual format, we promise you an action-packed 2 days of thought-provoking conversations and insightful analysis from an impressive array of speakers. In light of the challenges that we're facing, the devastating impact of the pandemic, the economic disruption, and quite frankly, a world turned upside down, we have focused this year's summit on building a better future. Our panels, armchair discussions, and presenters will serve as a showcase for how the US and Indian companies are connecting our two countries and working to create a more sustainable and inclusive tomorrow. We will hear how businesses working with our respective governments are expanding the foundations of a strong and growing commercial relationship between the United States and India, creating jobs that help people in both countries fulfill their aspirations, and driving innovation to help us overcome the greatest challenges. More than ever, industry is playing a vital role in helping our communities overcome hardship and become more secure and more resilient. In response to the pandemic, companies are tackling the dramatic supply chain disruptions to ensure that our homes and our businesses have adequate supplies of food, medicine, and personal protective equipment. They're developing life-saving therapeutics and promising vaccine candidates. And they're working to maintain the integrity and resiliency of our financial and digital infrastructure. This year's summit highlights some of these efforts. We will kick off this morning with an inaugural armchair conversation between Minister of Commerce and Industry Piyush Goyal and Congressman Ami Bera, the chairman of the House Subcommittee on South Asia. That will be moderated by Madhu Gopalan, the India head of Procter & Gamble. They will examine how the COVID-19 has changed our understanding of global supply chains, exposing risks and vulnerabilities, and creating new avenues for cooperation between the United States and India. We will then have an opportunity to hear from India's Finance Minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, on the plans to promote India's economic recovery. The minister and our board chair, Vijay Advani, the executive chairman of Nuveen, will then engage in a fireside chat to discuss the ways in which industry can enable and accelerate the recovery process. We will also dig deeper into the economic plans and policies in a roundtable with Secretary of Economic Affairs, Tarun Bajaj. And then we're going to shift gears with an exciting and inspiring array of speakers to look beyond the current challenges and explore how we build back better, how we're leveraging technology to drive productivity, how we're rethinking the ways in which we live, work, and travel, how we're looking at sustainability and building a more resilient infrastructure for tomorrow, and using innovation and collaboration not only to beat this pandemic, but prevent the next one. We will also be looking at how we can ensure that the Indo-Pacific continues to be a zone of peace and prosperity. And we will hear from the Minister of Transport, Highways, and MSME, Ms. Nitin Gadkari. But we don't want you to think that we're all work and no play. So to end day one, we have 3 very special sessions to celebrate the rich cultural connection between our two countries. In our virtual social hour, you will have the opportunity to escape with the fusion sitar compositions of Rishabh Rikaram Sharma, go on a culinary journey with food blogger and cookbook author Priya Krishna, along with 3 acclaimed chefs, or take that journey inward with Sister Shivani and explore mindfulness techniques that have been embraced by businesses in the US and India to help improve wellness and help employees cope with the stress of these times. Tomorrow, we will return with another remarkable group of speakers as US Chamber CEO Tom Donahue, Minister of External Affairs Jaishankar, Secretary Pompeo, our two excellent ambassadors, former ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley, and of course, the highlight of the summit, an address by His Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi, as well as the presentation of our Global Leadership Awards to two outstanding CEOs in our corporate community. But none of this exceptional summit programming would be possible without the support of our members, our Board of Advisors, and the India Advisory Council, and most particularly without the support of our generous event sponsors. We are grateful for the important financial contributions of our platinum sponsors, the Adani Group, American Tower, Nuveen, and Procter & Gamble. Our gold sponsors, Abbott, Amway, General Electric, HCL, Lennar, McClarty Associates, and Zoho. And finally, our silver sponsors, Aiken Gump, Bharat Forge, Covington & Burling, General Atomics Aeronautics, HSBC, Jet Synthesis, Microsoft, Shrey Infrastructure Finance, Taj Hotels, the Tata Group, TransUnion, Uber, Virgin Hyperloop, Walmart, and Western Digital. I also want to make sure to thank our partner organizations, Invest India, which is doing phenomenal work in the US-India corridor, and CNBC TV18, our media partner. But this year, we have also taken a particular focus on our state partners, because USIBC not only emphasizes the Washington to New Delhi corridor, but we are present with industry throughout the diverse cross-section of the United States and Indian cities and states. We're grateful to have a strong partner network for the 2020 IDEA Summit agenda with Colorado, South Carolina, Indiana, New Jersey, Utah, and Arkansas, with a special thanks to SIDO. Equally, we have been working with Indian states through our Destination India Investment Series and are proud to have state webinars with 8 states and many more to follow. I could go on and on about all the wonderful things that are happening, but I know you're excited to get this show on the road. So thank you for joining us, and let's begin.
Thank you, Nisha. Very good evening and good morning, and welcome to the inaugural keynote conversation on global supply chains and combating COVID-19. This is a topic of conversation in every capital in the world today and every boardroom in the world today. Companies are revisiting the just-in-time and lean manufacturing that has underpinned global supply chains so far in the context of the havoc COVID has wreaked. Governments, on the other hand, are looking at balancing safety of citizens first and foremost, and also supporting ramp up of economies and looking at new opportunities that the global supply chain realignments might offer. In this context, public-private partnerships become even more critical. Among many examples, one is the work P&G is doing in India, PG Suraksha India, collaborating with local governments on supporting health and safety of supply chain workers and helping governments and communities create a resilient supply chain, not just for India, but for global supply chains that are served out of India. Of course, in this context, the India-US relationship holds a very special place. There's been a lot of progress on this relationship over the last many years, but I'm sure all of us would agree that there is immense potential to do more. And there is probably a once-in-a-generation opportunity today as the world goes through this COVID crisis and goes through this global realignment of supply chains on how India and US can partner and collaborate for their mutual benefit. USIBC had recently published the Global Supply Chain Initiative. And as part of this initiative, there would be insights shared on strengths of supply chains in every major state in India, and also provide a platform for both the governments and industries on both sides to partner. To dialogue about this exciting topic, we're honored to be joined by our two distinguished panelists. I'd like to first start by introducing Honorable Minister Piyush Goyalji, Minister of Commerce, Industry and Railways of Government of India. I've had the pleasure of meeting the Honorable Minister a few times, and we all know of the unique nature in which he serves the public good by being a catalyst of bringing together the best of government and industries. An example a lot of us are very familiar with is the Ujala initiative, where he orchestrated the transformation of sustainable LED lighting and made the government intervention a catalyst to our industry leapfrog and make this move as well. Sir, thank you for joining us and look forward to the conversation with you today. Our second eminent panelist today is Representative Bera. Representative Bera is the longest serving Indian American on the US Congress. Among his many accomplishments in public service, a very unique insight and worldview Representative Bera brings is the fact that he's a medical practitioner. He's been managing healthcare on the private sector side. He's also been managing healthcare on the public sector side. And this brings a very unique worldview to this conversation. And we're delighted, Representative Bera, that you could join us today. So let me kick off the dialogue and the conversation today. The first question to both our eminent panelists. And this question, of course, no surprise, is on the status of India-US trade as it pertains to the current global supply chain opportunities. As we said, there's been tremendous progress, but there is potential to do a lot more. USIBC recently did a Destination India series, and both of you would be glad to know that there is immense interest in every single state that this virtual series was done in, where American companies had an opportunity to meet with state leaders to discuss opportunities for India to be part of global American supply chain programs. What do you think are the realistic near-term goals for this relationship as it pertains to the global supply chain realignment? And what could be some of the aspirational long-term goals? Let me start first with Honorable Minister Goyalji.
Thank you, Mr. Gopalan. Thank you, Nisha, for setting the context of the USIBC India Ideas Summit. Compliments to you for the very interesting lineup that you put together for this two-day event. Warm welcome to you, Congressman Ami Bera. It's always a delight to meet you, to listen to you. I think COVID-19 can possibly keep us apart across the oceans and have to meet virtually, but our hearts are in the right place, and I am quite confident that we will continue to engage, we will continue to beat COVID-19 together and emerge victorious in the days to come. India and US are very natural partners. We are partners for mutual benefit. We work together for growth for decades due to our shared values, our mutual trust, the goodwill and robust engagement that citizens of both countries share with each other. In fact, even during the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw both countries almost on a daily basis having a dialogue on different subjects. When it came to the pharmaceutical requirements, the medical requirements of both countries, we worked together to meet the needs of citizens of both countries. We were very happy to be able to ensure unrestricted and unlimited supplies as much as required by the United States, whether it was hydroxychloroquine, whether it was the various paracetamol and its derivatives. We were happy to receive ventilators from the US. It's been a mutual relationship coming out of trust. And I think as trusted partners, both countries have a long future ahead of us to work together, to create more resilient supply chains, to plug in the gaps wherever each one of us finds different geographies which are not cooperating in our effort to create sustainable, well-meaning, rules-based and transparent economic activity between nations. I think the US and India are natural allies. Our leaders share great chemistry. Our people work with each other extremely well, and I'm sure we can jointly advance the prosperity in both countries. In the long term, I believe we have a quick trade deal which has some of the pending matters built up over the last couple of years, which we need to get out of the way quickly. We are almost there. I think another couple of calls and we should be able to sort that out. Post that, as was already intimated to the US Congress, the United States and India need to sit down on the negotiating table. I don't know if that can be done before the elections or post the elections, but we need to work towards a much more sustainable, a much more robust, a much more enduring partnership in the form of a free trade agreement to which India is willing to work with an open mind, with a willingness to open our hearts and our markets with a corresponding opportunity for Indian businesses in the US. We believe we should also look at an early harvest in the form of a preferential trade agreement so that we can, rather than waiting for the gains of a free trade agreement, which may take several years to conclude, we could look at an early harvest of maybe 50, maybe 100 products and services where we can engage with mutual trust and an open spirit so that the partnership between the US and India can kickstart much faster. We can build institutional cooperation between the two nations and increase the interaction between business, industry, and our people for mutual benefit, for mutual strategic cooperation. And I have no doubt in my mind that the US and India, the leaders and the people of both countries are looking forward to this close partnership between the two countries, which I believe is central to a free, open, inclusive, peaceful, and prosperous new world that I foresee post-COVID. I would like to invite US businesses and the US government and other stakeholders such as USIBC to partner us in our effort to work together towards a much more stable, robust, and resilient global order in the years ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, for those opening remarks. Representative Vera.
Thank you, Mr. Gopalan and Nisha and USIBC for everything that you do in terms of bringing the two countries together. Mr. Goyal, I couldn't agree with you more. My last trip abroad in February was to India, and just 1 week ahead of President Trump's visit. And while we were hoping that we would get the beginning of a trade deal done, I don't think we are that far apart. And I couldn't agree with you more that let's take those steps forward. And I think the pandemic, COVID-19, presents a real unique opportunity for us to move this relationship forward. What the pandemic really has exposed is an over-reliance on a single source, in this case, China, for many of the raw ingredients, the PPE, the APIs for our pharmaceutical sector. And as we think about, in the next 6 months, 12 months, how we defeat this virus, India has a very significant role in this. India has a very mature pharmaceutical sector. Our companies are already working very closely with India. A California company in my home state, Gilead and Remdesivir, there's a close partnership there. But more importantly, as we think about how we defeat this virus, it really is about getting a vaccine that's safe and effective, and not vaccinating one country, but vaccinating the entire planet. And this is a unique area where India has a mature vaccine manufacturing sector. They've been manufacturing and distributing vaccines for much of the world for quite some time. And this is a place where India can help the United States, but also can help the rest of the world. So I'm wildly optimistic about how we move forward here. And it's not just the United States and India. When you talk to the European Union, when you talk to like-minded allies in Australia, Japan, elsewhere, they see the vast potential of India as well. And I think the next 6-12 months, as we help our citizens get through this pandemic, help our economies get through this pandemic, can only bring us closer together if we're willing to work together. And if we do work together to build on the strengths of both countries, we will get through this faster. And we will help create a 21st century framework of countries that value democracy, that value human rights, that value free and open markets. And I see the opportunities as immense. And this is not something that's just starting right now. If you look at the past few decades, the trading relationship between the two countries has really been growing. And it's not just the US companies making investments in India. When you look at the number of Indian companies that are making investments here in the United States, the jobs that are creating, this is a bilateral relationship. Also, my parents immigrated from Gujarat in the 1950s. And we were a small diaspora when I was growing up. But when you look at the Indian American community here, it's now the wealthiest community in America, the most educated community in America. Increasingly, when I first got elected, I was the only Indian American member of Congress. We're now at 5 members of the House of Representatives and Senate. And you look at the number of candidates that are running, I think there's a real role that the Indian American diaspora can play in bringing the two countries closer together and bringing our two economies closer together. So, the sky's the limit. I think we will have a challenge in the next 6, 12, 24 months as we work through the pandemic. But if we're smart and strategic about this, I think we will come out on the back end closer as friends and partners, and we can set the framework for what the 21st century looks like. So again, I'm wildly optimistic, and I think there's a real silver lining here.
Thank you, Representative Bera. It's so good to hear the adjectives used by both of you. The minister talked about India and US as natural partners, and Representative Bera talked about the relationship having sky as its limit. On that note, I'd like to move this conversation forward with asking Minister Goyal. So you talked about a rules-based, transparent working environment for both countries and for India in general. And we know you've been a passionate advocate in terms of positioning India to benefit from this global supply chain realignment. And as you know, USIBC recently released a white paper on the steps that India can take in terms of positioning itself in this time. So we would like to hear from you what specific steps are being taken by the Indian government to position India to benefit from this global supply chain realignment that's happening.
Well, I think every investor in the long run is looking for very few but very credible commitments when he's looking to engage with other countries. He's looking for a stable and predictable policy environment. He's looking for fair play. wants to make sure that he won't be discriminated against, will not be left holding the can without a court of appeal. I think everybody wants to have an easy way of doing business, so you're not going through the maze of bureaucracy and through the rule book on every single thing. You're looking at better infrastructure in terms of logistics, in terms of utilities, in terms of common facilities that businesses, particularly manufacturers, require. By and large, industry and business wants to be left alone, wants to be given freedom to operate, and is willing to commit itself to work within the framework of a country's laws, work within the letter and spirit of the law that each country prepares for an orderly behavior in their country. And I think India is working towards making all of these enablers much easier, much better, much stronger, much more robust, whether it's ease of doing business, whether it's improving our competitive edge, whether it's bringing down our logistics costs, whether it's making it easier to get approvals and less intimidating to work with the government. I think all of these are the typical needs of business which we in government are trying to address. There is an opportunity, there's a trust deficit available globally, and India is hoping to be able to fill in that opportunity, that gap in international supply chains as a trusted partner, as a partner which, through the Atmanirbhar Bharat program, the Self-Reliant India program, wishes to prepare India to work with the rest of the world on stronger terms, on more equal terms, offer India as a market opportunity, yet also look at seizing other market opportunities from a position of strength with quality products, with products which are made at competitive prices, which are affordable for people around the world. And I believe our government's commitment, while we talk of a self-reliant India, is to not close the doors to global engagement, but to rather open them wider so that India becomes a part of global interactions and global businesses more as an equal, more as a trusted partner with products and services which are high quality, which are of significant value proposition to other parts of the world, which are competitive in pricing. And we in government are committed to making it a two-way, mutually beneficial engagement. We'll make it easier to trade across borders, yet make it easier to work within India also. And therefore opening a 1.3 billion people market opportunity, both for businesses in India and the world. May the best man win.
Very well said, Minister. And the big takeaway is all about making India a reliable partner for global supply chains. And on that point, Representative Bera, you mentioned about the diversification of global supply chains that the US government and US companies are looking at. What do you think are some of the lessons we can draw from the COVID disruptions to global supply chains? And what specific opportunities are there for US and Indian companies and governments to apply these lessons to their mutual benefit?
Yeah, thank you. Listening to Minister Goyal, I think he touched on something that we've seen in the Modi administration. Minister Goyal talked about predictability in the regulatory regime, and I at least have always believed that Prime Minister Modi's first term was about creating some of that regulatory certainty and the necessary reforms to make it easier to invest in India. The second term, this current term, is when hopefully we will see these gains. None of us predicted the pandemic, but the pandemic does present some of those opportunities. You know, what has been exposed by COVID-19 is how much of our supply chain over the past decade or two has gone to China. And, you know, it won't all come onshore. And in fact, I think, you know, as people talk about bringing everything back to the United States of America, the reality is much of that, some will come back to the United States for national security purposes, but much of it will look for other partner countries. And I think this is where India has a unique opportunity. Even India's pharmaceutical sector relies on China for many of the raw ingredients. And I think, you know, India recognizes that over-reliance on, you know, a single source is dangerous to its own national security, but also to its industry. And I think this is a real unique opportunity where we can come together, both on the pharmaceutical side, but more importantly, as we see vaccine, you know, I'll put my doctor hat on, you know, the rapidity with which we're, you know, seeing vaccine development trials. India is participating in some of these trials as well. You know, I think there's a unique opportunity for U.S. pharmaceutical companies and vaccine manufacturers to partner with India's manufacturing sector in the vaccine cycle, because the logistical challenge of, you know, this is not for the United States just manufacturing and distributing 300 million doses of vaccine. This is for the world. How do we come up with 6 to 7 billion doses of vaccine, create the glass vials, the syringes, the workforce to distribute and inoculate the entire planet? And, you know, again, India, I believe, has the largest vaccine manufacturer in the world, and has, you know, historically been manufacturing vaccine for the rest of the world. I think this is a place where, you know, India can work with the United States, not just to help us here at a price point that's accessible for the United States, but also for the rest of the world. And, you know, this is a unique opportunity where we all have to work together, and it's not a Democratic or Republican initiative. You've seen both Democratic presidents and Republican presidents, and here within Congress, you know, the caucus on India and Indian Americans is, if it's not the largest caucus, it's one of the largest caucuses. And, you know, in a bipartisan way, I think there is a real desire to work with India, especially as we see, you know, tensions with China, and, you know, the direction that China is moving. We'll continue to do business with China, but we also, you know, see the trajectory that they're headed in, and that gives us some pause here. And, you know, we see the challenges that India faces on its northern border as well. And I think it just creates an opportunity for like-minded allies that believe in free markets, that believe in competition. And competition is a good thing. It makes us better. But I do think, you know, this is a real unique moment in time where our two countries can get very close.
Thank you, Representative Breda. And as you rightly said, the opportunities starting with pharmaceuticals are immense, which can be applied across industries as well. Minister Goel, you talked about the importance of timely and a transparent process for approvals as something that industries look to, companies look to in terms of ease of doing business. One of the most anticipated things have been the single window clearance process. Any news to share on that, sir?
Yeah, but I must tell you that's been one of the most challenging assignments that I've worked on in the last 6 years. I have been in business myself. I started a small manufacturing company, nearly 40 years ago, when I was almost a child. And I still remember the kind of difficulties we used to face, even in a small thing like getting land approved or land licenses approved in those days. Over the years, I think different levels of government have kept adding layers of approvals, permits, licenses, and the entire system has become quite a maze. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been very, very keen that we should untangle this entire maze. And I'm happy to share with you, we have a whole team working along with Invest India. Invest India is all a partner with USIBC in many initiatives, working and understanding the needs of businesses in the US and across the world. They give us the necessary feedback and the information, which helps us in working towards a single window, which can go across the central government, the state government, even local bodies. And, I'll give you a simple example how I'm explaining it to my own officers. I said, look at the common application form that a student who applies to US university has to fill up. It's to 8 universities, one form, and a small supplement to each of the colleges answering an essay or giving some supplementary information. I know that because I've gone through with 2 kids working and studying in US schools over the last 6 or 7 years. Having gone through that, that's my simple basic document on which I'm trying to get my teams to work. We are understanding industry's pain points and their requirements. We are trying to create such a genuine single window, not a window behind which opens only to 10 doors behind it. It's a Herculean task. Will take some time, Mr. Gopalan, but I assure you, we are committed to making it happen. To begin with, one of the first things that on a pilot we're going to release very soon is a GIS-based land bank availability across the country, different parts of the country. We've identified in 6 states a few 100,000 hectares of land, and we are actually going to offer you a Google Earth view of particular lands which are available for industry to buy off, and then take it forward from there, so much so that my intention is a person sitting in Iceland should be able to not only locate the land he wants, but also pay for it and buy it off.
That's so good to hear. I love your analogy of the US college application, having seen it myself. And if we can get there, I think this would definitely be transformative in terms of ease of doing business. A lot of progress already made, and this could be the next S-curve. Thank you so much, and we look forward to the good news very soon, sir. Representative Bera, you made some interesting points on the partnerships between India and US in the pharmaceutical space. You rightly referred to the need for equitable vaccine access across the world and the unique role that the India vaccine industry can play. So you also, your home state is the birthplace of technology and some of the biggest technology companies across the world. And as we look at some of these opportunities in the pharmaceutical space, what do you think are some of the opportunities in the technology space, defense, aerospace, and other industries that we can learn from, deepen these partnerships?
Yeah, I think that the partnership and the opportunities are immense. If you think about, one thing, America still is the hub of research and innovation and the investments that we make both through our academic institutions, but also our private sector entrepreneurial side. I think the partnership on an academic to academic side, I think we can help India continue to build its own R&D sector, its own innovation sector. It already has a mature sector on the technology side, but we can take that one step further. And the reason why I think that area is so important is, in a wealthy country like the United States, we'll often develop products that are at a particular price point for the US markets, but those price points won't work for the rest of the world. Now, if we partner with India to make those products available to its population, but also to the rest of the world, has to now figure out how do we innovate to bring those price points down. And vaccines are a great example, but you can think about cell phone technology and other areas. And I think India's innovation is how can we mass produce these products at a lower price point? And then how can we take those products not just to the rest of the world, but also bring those products back to the United States to make them help us deal with our own challenges. The cost of healthcare and other things in the United States are a challenge for us. So I think India has an opportunity in partnership, our companies working together, that not only benefit the United States addressing some of its challenges, but as partners going into third countries. And I've used the example of solving challenges in Africa. India has a much older relationship with the African continent. There's a large diaspora in Africa, and I think the United States on aid and development ought to partner with India to think about those innovative solutions as we go into third countries and the rest of the developing world.
I think they're excellent points that I think the part about R&D is looking at the partnerships on the academic side on both sides, and the idea of jointly partnering to go after opportunities to support third countries as well. I think something for all of us to think over. The last question I pose now back to both the panelists is really on the challenge governments across the world are facing in terms of this balance of safety, protecting the lives of citizens, but also supporting livelihoods and getting economies started. And this is proving to be a very tough challenge for every government across the world. So I'd love to get your thoughts of how you think the US and India are approaching this challenge. I'll pose that question first to Representative Bera and then to Minister Gore.
So I think it's the right question to ask, because as both of our countries, certainly grapple with widespread, the widespread virus and the number of cases that we're seeing in both countries, our first responsibility is to protect our citizens and make sure their health is protected. But we also have to grapple with the reality that the next 6, 12, maybe 24 months, we know the virus will be circulating. And at the end of the day, you have to put food on your table. You have to have a roof over your head. So we have to figure out what's the right balance. In the United States, unfortunately, politics has come into play. I think we're moving through that, and there are measures that we think everyone should be doing in terms of wearing a face covering, physical distancing when you can, and good hygiene. But as we learn more about this virus, it feels like we've been in this pandemic for several years. We're really in month 6 of the pandemic, and really month 3 or 4 of really grappling with this virus. Our doctors are learning more about how to manage the patients. Every day we're learning more science. I would hope that the world in a transparent way shares information freely, because again, this is not a challenge for one state or one country. This is the global challenge, and we should be sharing what we're learning very transparently across the world, so we're learning from each other. And I think we have to get to a point where we can manage the virus, but we also do have to resume trade and the ability to interact with one another. As much as I enjoy the virtual summit, it's not a replacement for in-person diplomacy. And I think that's incredibly important. We will figure some of that out as we move through this. We will work through it, trying to reduce risk and keep people safe. And again, I hope we do it in a collaborative way, but we also do have to keep our economies open and working, because people do have to have a livelihood. They do have to put food on the table, and they have to put a roof over their head.
Minister Goel.
Thank you, Congressman. Those were very, very appropriate closing comments. In fact, I think the beauty about the US-India relationship is that we complement each other. We are not in competition with each other. On almost every score, the work that the United States does in different areas helps India, and we can actually become the manufacturer or the the producer of a lot of the good technologies that the US comes up with to make it affordable, to make it at scale and meet the needs, growing needs of the world. I think everybody agrees that we have to balance lives and livelihoods. But as Prime Minister Modi, who today is the most popular leader, who leads a billion plus people and who trust him, who follow his directions, his instructions to the T, India has been able to actually face the pandemic much better than other parts of the world had thought India would be able to do. There were a lot of concerns that used to be expressed. How will India handle this, given the large population, the dense population, and lack of adequate facilities? But on one call of the Prime Minister, the entire nation went into lockdown. We broke the coronavirus transmission chain. We gave ourselves time to prepare to meet this challenge. So we are now self-sufficient in personal protective equipment and masks and hand sanitizers. From only 4 laboratories doing this test, we now have 1,000. From 2,500 a day, we now do 400,000 a day tests. We are self-sufficient in ventilators. I'll shortly be starting export of ventilators. So the country as a whole has rallied behind Prime Minister Modi to ensure that we protect lives so that we live another day for our livelihood. When we studied earlier pandemics, and Prime Minister Modi has done a lot of research on this, we realized that those countries who focused on saving lives in the near, medium term and long run did well in the economy. And those which focused only on the economy tended to collapse and growth went down. I think India has played a very good balancing act. We have focused first on protecting lives, second on balancing lives and livelihoods, and third, we are now unlocking the country, learning to live with the pandemic, as Congressman Bera rightly said, learning to live with it with the necessary precautions. And imagine a country of 1.3 billion people today, nobody moves out without a face cover or a mask. You won't find anybody spitting on the road, which we were always worried about for, what, centuries, if not longer. But today the country has that discipline. There is that awareness in all the people of the country, and the trust that Prime Minister Modi, who's leading from the front, literally from the on the battleground, and the country has rallied behind him. And I'm confident we will emerge victorious from this pandemic. We will ensure that the country saves lives and simultaneously promotes livelihoods. My best wishes to the India Ideas Summit. Congressman Bera, thank you very much for some very, very encouraging comments from you. You have always been a trusted friend whom we all look up to as a part of the US-India engagement. And I'm sure you will continue to support the various efforts that well-meaning organizations like USIBC are continuously engaged in to further strengthen this bond of friendship and brotherhood. My best wishes to all the panelists. My best wishes to all those who are listening in onto this webinar. Please stay safe, stay healthy, take care of your family. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Goyal, and thank you, Representative Bera, for those wonderful insights. It's so heartening to see the two of you look at this the COVID impact as an opportunity for both countries to further strengthen this special relationship. Thank you.
Thank you. Namaskar.
Well, that was a fantastic way to start off our 2 days India Ideas Summit, a very inspiring and optimistic conversation about the opportunity between the United States and India. Next, we're going to turn to the Honorable Finance Minister of India to think about and talk about the economic impact and the road to recovery. It's my honor and pleasure to introduce to you The chairman of the board of the U.S.-India Business Council, Mr. Vijay Advani, who is also the executive chairman of Nuveen, a asset management company that has under its control over $1 trillion in assets that it is investing in the United States and around the world. Now, I want to have a particular note of appreciation for the role that Vijay has played for the USIBC team since particularly the pandemic onset earlier this year. Vijay has been a mentor and a guide for all of us in helping us adapt and really find the focus and the value add that you, our members, want to see from us. So Vijay, thank you for that. And over to you for the next conversation with the finance minister.
Thank you, Nisha, and hello, everyone. Minister Sitharaman, on behalf of the USIBC board and our members and other guests here today, I'd like to welcome you to the USIBC's 20th India Ideas Summit, which reflects our 45th year of supporting the development of the India-US relationship. We are honored that you've taken the time to join us today. We're looking forward to our conversation. India and the US have come a long way since USIBC started its work in 1975. Our relationships can be summed up with something Henry Ford once said: coming together is a beginning, staying together is progress, but working together is success. By that definition, our two countries are really successful. Prime Minister Modi, along with his cabinet, have created an unparalleled growth story for the Indian economy. All sectors, digital, defense, manufacturing, energy, and of course, financial services, have benefited from policies intended to attract foreign direct investment, improve the ease of doing business, and create an environment for growth and expansion. These reforms have transformed the lives of millions of Indian citizens and brought Indian capabilities and skills to the forefront of the global economy. And it is this very robustness of Indian markets and the strength of the financial infrastructure that will be fundamental to giving India the economic resiliency it needs to emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic. The tools, the skills, and the commitment are already in place. COVID-19 has forced policymakers around the world to balance the physical health of their citizens against the soundness of the markets and the economy on which these citizens depend for their livelihoods. These are not easy choices for any government. Your recent economic and fiscal measures have helped stabilize the markets, fortify the companies that operate within them, and set the Indian economy and its stakeholders, both domestic and foreign, on a path forward during these difficult times. But I don't believe that we are out of the woods yet. And whether it is India or the US, we still have a long ways to go and hard choices ahead of us. The pandemic has made clear the importance of the partnership between industry and policymakers in saving lives and livelihoods, as well as for developing structural reforms to promote a dynamic and sustainable recovery. To make real the themes of this year's Idea Summit, Build a Better India, it is imperative that all stakeholders, both government and industry, must align in their vision and priorities and have a shared understanding of the challenges and the goals ahead. I'd like to use our time together today to start this process. We look forward to hearing from your vision of economic recovery, how you see where we are and how can we move forward to protect jobs and savings of average investors, continue attracting foreign direct investment, and power the growth trajectory through new reforms. USIBC and its members believe this to be a unique opportunity one in which industry can align itself with your vision and help resolve the challenges to your collective goals. We will hear from industry after this session as we have a discussion with Secretary Bajaj. USIBC members and guests, I'd now like to take a moment to introduce to you the Honorable Minister of Finance, Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman, who has had an illustrious career as a policymaker by any measure and any jurisdiction. She is currently the Union Minister of Finance and Corporate Affairs, a position she assumed in May 2019. Prior to that, she was a Union Minister of Defense, and prior to that, Union Minister of Commerce. Minister Sitharaman has been a member of the BJP party since 2006 and served as party spokesperson in 2010. She was inducted in Prime Minister Modi's cabinet as a junior minister in 2014 and was elected to the Rajya Sabha, India's upper house, from Andhra Pradesh. I'm proud to announce, and especially as a father of 3 girls myself, that she was the first woman to serve as a full-time defense minister and has been the first woman to serve as finance minister. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me present to you Minister Sitharaman. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you. Namaste. Gives me immense pleasure to be with you all, especially when you're marking your 45th annual gathering. And also, I think at this time when the entire world is looking at what is happening because of the pandemic, the standstill that economies have come to, the recovery process, the planning for the recovery and so on. And at a time like this, to also be able to talk with a focus on innovation and inclusion, I think you just did the right thing for businesses of both India and the US to think in terms of what industry can do towards recovery of both our economies. And in that process, I think we are sharing our thoughts about what each of our governments have done and to set the, let's say, the landscape of what I'm going to probably present before you in somewhat concise fashion is to understand that even today, the large economies are not the one where the highest per capita income is. Per capita income today is high in economies which are not necessarily large. It is spread all over the world. And if democracies are the ones which have worked towards elimination of poverty, democracies are the ones which have given opportunity for innovation, and democracies are the ones which have given immense play for industry to innovate and come up with better products, more efficient processes. I think we are talking to the right two democracies which have the necessary wherewithal to look at the future as we get out of the pandemic. So I think there cannot be a better forum in which this discussion on innovation and inclusion can happen. And therefore, for me to get this opportunity to interact with you on this topic, I feel very privileged. Simply, I would start by saying there is a need globally to spend more time and money in understanding technology, in investing in R&D, and making sure more funds are made available for those who actually bring in that innovation, like the startups and industry also together with governments will have to now spare a thought and also extend a helping hand for all the incubators and the companies which come in, the startups which want to benefit from incubation. So this industry and academia relationship also has to be strengthened, made more real time. So with this background, what I would like to say here is what India has done between 2014 and today has actually done a great deal of service for this time, this unfortunate time when all of us are caught up in the pandemic. I take the example of how for India, especially because there was a great drive between 2014 and 19, the first term of Prime Minister Modi, a great emphasis was placed on financial inclusion. Nearly 40% of the Indian population, which is at the bottommost rung, who did not have even a bank account, were provided bank accounts, and those accounts were reconciled with their identity, which was given through what is called the Aadhaar identity, which was a digital identity. We were able to actually, first of all, weed out a lot of those bogus accounts, bogus cards, through which a lot of money was getting pilfered. Even the food rations which were being distributed were going to not so deserving poor. So that weeding out was done, that reconciliation with the digital identity was established, and as a result of which, when the pandemic struck us, unfortunately, the inclusion actually was not a challenge. Free food grains were distributed, and 81 million people were given free food, are being given free food even today till November, so that the poorest of poor will be covered under every safety net that we have to include them in. And how was this possible? This was possible because all of them were given digitized, identity-based bank accounts, and also digitized way of recognizing their level of poverty, and identity-based, therefore, public distribution system could reach them. So in doing this, we were also able to do one more thing. Many of those villages in which people live are already connected by optical fiber. And because of optical fiber connectivity, today at the time of pandemic striking us, with hospitals probably just bare minimum facilities existing, telemedicine has come to play a very big role. And as a result, controlling and treating and tracing people for treatment for the pandemic has encouraged telemedicine in a big way. And that itself tells me that technology has played a big role even during this pandemic, where I know some economies globally were even not able to reach directly to the bank accounts of the poorest who needed help, had to take checks physically, bank checks physically to the account, to the households where they were living, rather than digitally transfer money. So telemedicine was possible because of the way in which optical fiber has reached far-flung areas of India. Bank accounts were given, and as a result, cash was transferred. And because they were Aadhaar-linked public distribution identity cards, free food could reach them. Now, all this is not just going to be simply possible with governmental initiatives alone. We know during the pandemic, several industries have very quickly ramped up their production systems, that the mask and the protective equipments that people needed, personal protective equipments, have all been ramped up, where we had no production of such things in this country. When in March we came up with a huge lockdown announcement. Entire April the country was in lockdown. Later in May, little by little, end of May we opened up. And by June the country really was getting partly opened up. But in the course of this lockdown, many industries which had other core activities divested from there, at least temporarily, and moved over to producing things. There was a shift in the production priorities, and we produced enough number of PPEs, the protection equipments, and we were able to benefit from not only using it for our own purposes, but we were able to send many to many of the countries which needed them. I'm just elaborating on that only because today the industry in India has clearly recognized the challenges which have come because of the pandemic. And many of them have started resetting their priorities, making sure their production, which depended on many other factors, are also being relooked at. And technology has now come in a very big way. I remember 1 year ago, or even a bit before that, when I was in defense, talking with many in the USIBC about Industrial Revolution 4.0. In Davos, that was the focus. But today, Industrial Revolution 4.0 means a totally different kind of pandemic-driven necessity that many of the industries are recognizing. So the sum and substance of what I'm trying to give you as a picture emanating from India is all of us will have to now spend a lot more on artificial intelligence, big data, because these are the things which are making a lot of difference, especially when the social distancing and other things are causing necessities which we wouldn't have otherwise imagined. India, of course, has shown under Prime Minister Modi the inclination to improve our performances, and that is why we were able to move upwards in the Global Innovation Index. We were able to move better on the ease of doing business, and therefore, continuous exchange of thought, continuous tendency to reform, undertake such structural reforms which will make a big difference is something which Prime Minister Modi has never forgotten. And I would just put across to you that even during this pandemic, when we were trying to ensure that nobody goes hungry, everybody gets their due, deliveries are made at their doorstep, and money is given to people in their bank accounts and so on, even as the priority was on that, enough and more work was done in consultation with stakeholders, all through video conferences and so on, even during the lockdown, and very many big time announcements on reform, structural reform have all been made during this period. That is, even when the challenge of the pandemic was before us, we ensured that we used this opportunity to come up with some of the major structural reforms which have waited for decades, opening up agriculture, allowing farmers to choose who they sell their product to at what price. May sound simple, but it was a reform which was dependent on so many provinces. Every state had to agree. But the central government saw that it was possible to bring that change because we clearly understood interstate activities were with the union government's powers, and in the list of responsibilities between union and the states, because it was entirely with the central government, we were able to open up agriculture. Labor codes are also being completely changed, new freshness is being brought in, those codes will get cleared in the parliament. And above all, during the lockdown, the several things which have been done have now borne fruits that I can confidently tell you that we are able to see green shoots. And you might say it's a bit too early to say that, but the indicators that are before us are very, very clear that the power consumption has increased, toll collection and the roads have increased. Very clearly, the bank operations and their transaction of businesses, particularly the digital mode and not the ATMs, have increased in their traction. Very clearly, these are signs. The PMI managers index is also improved. So I can see that the stimulus that we gave, which has touched about 10% of the GDP, has actually made a big difference for companies which want to come out of the lockdown and the effects of the lockdown. Now, not only that, Prime Minister gave a call for Atmanirbhar Bharat. I would take this opportunity to say Atmanirbhar Bharat is not an inward-looking idea. It doesn't shut the doors for exports or imports, particularly the imports. We want India to be strong. We want India to be speaking from position of strength, particularly from the economic point of view. Our MSMEs contribute to over 40% of our exports. We want them to be strong. We want them to be supported by a banking system which is strong. And that is why from among the other reforms that we've undertaken, I would want to draw your attention to one particular announcement which I made in the month of June, end of June. Now, in India, every sector, is a private sector. I don't know how simply I can say it, but there is no sector which is reserved for public sector alone to be present. Meaning, every sphere of activity is now opened up for private sector to come in. And we have announced that we will have a list of strategic sectors, which will be only a select few. And in only them will there be private sectors, public sector remaining. In other words, in every sector, private sector will be, every sector of economic activity, private sector will be invited. The public sector or the public sector undertakings will be present only in certain predetermined, certain announced areas of activities. And even there, because the private sector will be allowed, there will be better competition. And in those sectors which we declare as strategically important, even there will be only up to a maximum of 4 public sector organizations and not more. The private sector is going to be anyway welcome. So, simply put, there will not be any activity in India which will be the exclusive domain of the public sector undertakings. Private sector is welcome to come and operate in every one of them. And the public sector's presence will be reduced in only those few strategic sectors. This was also an announcement made during the lockdown when we were equally giving emphasis on livelihood, taking care of people and their lives, giving them relief for food and money. The other side, we were clearing up agriculture, we were opening it up, we were also saying private sector will now enter every sphere of activity in India. The green shoots are, as I said, placed more because of the high frequency indicators that we see. They are high frequency indicators. We will go along as we watch them. It's not as if we've concluded that the economy has seen green shoots and therefore we won't take any more steps. We've kept all the options necessary absolutely open. The government is willing to participate, talk with everybody, and see what best has to be done. Interventions can happen even in the future, depending on how industry responds to us. And lastly, to conclude, I would only want to say there have been different speculations about to what extent the economies are going to contract. Globally, it is speculated 4.7, 4.5 levels percentage will come down. We don't know. Negative 4.9, India would be negative 4.7, 4.1. Different figures are floating around. But I can see the revival of the economy, particularly if you look at India's rural areas. Agriculture, the Rabi or the summer crop has had a very good crop. All of them, where necessary, have been procured at reasonable prices so that the farmers are not left high and dry looking for purchasers. Now the assessment or the estimate for the Kharif crop, which is the short crop because of the monsoon, has also come. We can clearly see agriculture sector is driving this revival. Activities related to the rural economy, whether it's the tractor sales, whether it's the rural agricultural tool sales, whether it is the logistics which deals with these food sector and everything else, are all up and about. So I think now we are at a stage where very clearly, if we can synchronize between the movement of those monitoring the economy and the regulators, the financial sector, and also the regulators, if they all work together, a very good, strong recovery is only there before us. So I must put in one last word about the way in which the RBI, the Reserve Bank of India, and the Ministry of Finance have worked together in sync with one another that concurrently both of us have been taking such efforts so that the industry understands the 3-month moratorium which was given to them, after which it was extended for another 3 months. Liquidity was ensured so that 3.9%, if I'm right, of the GDP has been infused into the economy. Liquidity through the RBI introduced into the economy is about 3.9% of the GDP. So the RBI has also been working together. Institutional regulators such as the SEBI and others have also been cooperating. So I can see that there is a clear understanding of what this pandemic has meant to us, how the private sector has also understood and is working together with the government. The stimulus package which was given has had some kind of a resonance in the ground. Particularly the MSMEs have been attended to with specific programs, whether it's a partial guarantee or 100% guarantee. Types and different types of packages have been given to them. With all this, I hope that the Indian industry, together with the government, will ensure a good, speedy and sustainable recovery post the pandemic. So with these words, sorry for a long monologue, but I'm sure you would be able to bring your life into this conversation.
So thank you. Thank you so much for your opening comments, Minister. So I know I've polled our audience. We have 4 themes and we have only 10 minutes left. So I'm going to make sure that we try and go through these four questions for you. The first is on foreign direct investment and foreign investment. India has had an unprecedented growth, 7% GDP growth for the last several years. FDI has increased dramatically, 18% to $73 billion. So as we look to promote India's economic recovery, foreign capital has the potential to play a critical role. And what foreign capital really needs is consistency, transparency, and predictability of rules. And so the question is, under these, I know you've announced certain reforms in May. Can the audience expect any other reforms to really attract FDI? And a follow-up to that is, I know that the government in May also announced that companies can list their securities on foreign stock exchange without having simultaneous listing in India. Could you share where we are on those guidelines? So that's the first theme on foreign investment.
You're right. The effort of this government is to ensure that there is a greater level of consistency in policy and there are no flip-flops. And we are ensuring transparency has always been the first thing about this government. So consistency of policy and leading to predictability is certainly something which is the top of our mind, and we've been insisting even in the announcement that I've made through the pandemic, have kept that as an underlying assumption. That is why if you just go back to September of last year, 2019, when I announced the corporate tax reduction, the first thing we said was, those of you who have been in the old system enjoying some kinds of exemptions are welcome to continue there. We are not bringing in any kind of disruption to that. But those who want far lesser rate are welcome to continue in the new one, which I'm introducing as of 1st October 2019. So in order to bring in predictability and consistency, we've kept the old system going till such a time everybody exhausts their exemptions. So that has been a driving principle in what we have been doing. And that shall continue, and we shall ensure that the policy predictability is something which will be kept up. And you're right, we have announced the direct listing abroad, and that has been a welcome step. I'm told at least Indian industry has been responding very positively on that.
Thank you. So let's move on to credit availability. In light of the lockdown measures, has contributed to the deterioration of market conditions, as we all know, not only in India, but across the world. We know there's going to be billions of dollars coming due end of August, especially by the NBFCs. And credit growth often goes hand in hand with economic growth. So both the supply of credit and the taking up of credit. Now, there's also been a reluctance to take on financial obligations. So the question I have is, what more can and should the government do to help borrowers feel more comfortable taking on risk? And on the supply side, what steps is the government doing beyond the measures that you announced in May to help credit get to the private sector?
You're aware that we had announced a stimulus package, various different sectors were to be covered by it, agriculture, infrastructure, particularly agriculture-based infrastructural activities, so that what has not been completely achieved by India over the several decades, that rural infrastructure should be given the necessary boost. So in each one of these categories, we ensured that we were giving them enough infusion of cash through banks, through lending. One particular example is of the 3 lakh crores which I had announced for the medium and small scale enterprises. We even changed their definition to be suitable for the MSMEs, which have been waiting for a change in their definition for quite some time, because they were wary of losing the benefits once they keep growing, because MSMEs had distinct benefits given to them by policy. And once they kept growing and once they crossed the threshold of being an MSME, they would lose out on the benefits. So we made sure that the definition was changed so that they wouldn't have to worry about losing benefits. They would still get it, having been an MSME for some time. Not only that, the 3 lakh crore is one example that I use to tell you that not just an announcement was made, but literally monitoring on a daily basis is happening. In that, first, we took an approach that banks should leave it to the customer, the MSME client, to say whether he wants it or whether he doesn't want this loan. So it wasn't the bank which was going to decide, it was the client who was going to decide. So no one was going to be found ineligible. In other words, the government was giving 100% guarantee that additional working capital would be given, additional term loan would be given, no one would be restructured much against their will. That is, if they restructured, they wouldn't be eventually sometime when they will be called an NPA because they were once restructured. So we ensured that all aspects of the rules which govern the banking, without hurting banks, let's say books, we ensured that money would reach. As I'm talking to you, I know nearly 1,80,000 crores have been sanctioned to the MSMEs, and of which nearly 85,000 crores have already been disbursed, meaning the money has gone into the accounts of these people, and this number is increasing by the day. Along with this, India has had a very peculiar setup in terms of the bank network. The scheduled commercial banks were most often found in metropolitan cities and also cities in the tier 3 tier and 2 tier. But further down the line, it was the non-banking financial companies which were there and which in the last probably 10 years have gradually lost out on a lot of clients who went bust. The NPA crisis had hit them. Now we came up with a partial guarantee system through which these NBFCs were also given money to carry on with their business, otherwise liquidity wouldn't reach the ground, by taking some of their not so investable grade assets too. Government took a big risk in taking assets which were not worthy, in taking their debt also, and then extending liquidity to them. As a result, today, most NBFCs have revived their business. They actually are very nicely spread in rural areas, far from flung rural areas, and businesses there. I am monitoring also the kind of lending which is happening. So the credit is not going to one particular class alone. Retail is happening, agriculture is happening, and so on.
So let's move on to the third theme, talking about the rural areas. So just yesterday, I think it was covered by the Financial Times, that over 120 million people in India lost their jobs. One estimate seems that about 40 million blue-collar workers left cities to return to their villages. So the question that I have is, are you seeing businesses that may have difficulty finding workers when because they have returned back home to their rural areas? And is the government considering any measures to help address these challenges, especially given the emphasis of your financial inclusion, etc.? So can you comment for a minute or so on that, and then I have to close one other question.
Very quickly on that, for those who migrated back to their villages during the lockdown, we looked at the numbers of people who've returned to their respective villages, and in about 116 districts, there were more than 25,000 of them in each one of them. 25,000 and more were in about 116 districts. In those districts, we have pulled all the government welfare schemes and said, between now and let us say October, they will all be engaged in governmental projects, which are rural projects, and paid so that they are not going to be without money in their hands. So many of the rural developmental activities have been taken up at a and I front loaded the money for it, 50,000 crores, and they've all got whatever assignment that area is undertaking through the governmental mechanism. So if they are there, they have some work, they get some money. In the meanwhile, I've also been talking with many industrial hubs to talk to industries to see what their actual problem is. Have their workers come back, or are they likely to come back now? And if they're not coming back, what provision are they making? And in that, what is it that the government has to do? I know from far-flung areas in the south, northeast, north, and so on, that many of them have now contacted those workers who've gone back to their respective villages to say, would you want to come now? And there are instances, of course, may not be commonplace, maybe one odd instances where 50, 60 of them have been brought together, aggregated, and taken back to their respective industries where they're working. Haryana government, for example, put it on the website and said, those who are coming back, please come back. Industries have said, we'll give you an additional 50% of salary so that you can. So that is happening and we are monitoring it.
Thank you. And I'm going to go, I know I'm getting the evil eye from the organizers, but I'm going to go 1 minute over. I'll play rank as the chairman of the USIBC. So the last point is ease of doing business. And your portfolio spans both the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Corporate Affairs. And the Modi government has done an incredible job. You know, the World Bank rankings moved up from 142 to 63, and with an aspiration to be in the top 50. So the question I have is, during this pandemic, we have enabled, digital measures to resolve these issues. For example, boards to fulfill their meeting mandates through video conferencing, digital signatures to, use DocuSign and others. Will this continue post-pandemic to improve the efficiency, especially if you're going to have foreign directors, on boards, etc.?
I've seen a very positive response on this measure, which we took, as you said rightly, as a result of the pandemic, because we didn't want companies to suffer. But now it seems perfectly possible to have it run without any glitches. And companies are expressing confidence that this is possible to continue. So we'll take their views on board and we're open to it.
Thank you so much, Minister Sitharaman, for your candid comments and your vision. I'm sure our colleagues on the, the audience have all appreciated your comments. We are now going to take a 5-minute break as we're going to automatically transition to the next session. We have there's going to be a dialogue between industry and the Secretary of Finance. So I think it'll automatically transition there. So I'll pass it over. I think, is it Tanisha to you or to Tanisha? All right, go ahead.
Thank you, USIBC. Thank you, Nisha. Thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you, Minister Sitaraman and Vijay, for a fascinating conversation and lots of wonderful insights into the ways in which India is planning its economic recovery. We have many, many more sessions planned for you, and into the Q&A chat box, you will see a link that will drive you to the USIBC India Ideas Summit website, where you can access links to the rest of today's program. As Vijay mentioned, we are very quickly going to begin a session with the DEA Secretary Tarun Bajaj, a roundtable discussion exploring in greater depth some of the conversation we just had with the Minister of Finance. We also have a fantastic lineup of sessions looking at technology, health, defense, resilient infrastructure, and many, many other things, in addition to an address from the Honorable Minister of Transport, Highways, and MSME. And finally, I want to remind all of you, even if you didn't sign up for it, please do join us for the social hour, where we have a wonderful array of talented speakers, whether it's the musical performance or it's a journey in Indian cuisine, or learning more about mindfulness. Many, many things ahead. Please make sure you go to the links that are in the chat box or in the Idea Summit website to access these sessions. And thank you very much. We look forward to engaging with you in the hours to come.